She was forgotten at the moment she needed it most. 3 years later, fate placed her face to face with the one she swore never to see again. But this time, she wasn't alone. The rain hammered against the windows of the 23rd floor office. Henry Maxwell watched the city of London below, an infinite web of lights that flickered like fallen stars on the concrete. His hands, firm around the whiskey glass, trembled slightly. It wasn't the alcohol. It was the weight of a memory that insisted on returning, precisely on that September night, 3 years later. September always had this effect on him. The month when everything began to crumble, silently like a building that gives way from within, before collapsing from without. He loosened his tie, feeling the fabric too tight around his neck. The office was empty. The employees had long since departed, but Henry never left early. He never had a reason to leave early. It was in this solitude that his mind betrayed the barriers he had built with such effort. Clara Miller. The name emerged as a painful whisper, bringing with it the scent of jasmine she always wore, the sound of her laughter echoing between the walls of that cramped apartment in Soho, where they lived as if the world outside didn't exist. Henry still remembered the day he saw her for the first time. Notting Hill, a random Saturday afternoon. He needed to escape the family noise, the expectations, the endless meetings. He entered a bustling coffee shop, looking only for silence and a decent coffee. She was sitting near the window, surrounded by papers and colorful pencils, her brown hair falling over her shoulders as she drew something that looked like a dragon wearing glasses. He had smiled. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled like that, without thinking, without calculating. Clara looked up at that moment as if she felt his gaze. And she smiled back. It was as simple as that, as improbable as that. He heir to a tech empire, accustomed to air-conditioned rooms and PowerPoint presentations. She, a freelance illustrator who lived off commissions for small publishers and sold watercolors at street fairs. Henry shook his head, trying to push away the memories, but they kept coming one after another, relentless. The first conversations, the meetings that became frequent, the walks through the city centre, discovering second-hand bookstores and hidden shops. The first time she took him to her apartment, a tiny space but full of life, with plants hanging in the windows and drawings taped to the walls. The first time he kissed her, under an awning while it rained, feeling that finally he was living something real. They moved in together within weeks. Henry's family didn't know. No one knew. And that was exactly how he wanted it. In that small apartment, he wasn't the CEO in training, the eldest son, the face of the new generation of British entrepreneurs. He was just Henry, and she was just Clara, and that was enough. For almost a year, they lived in a fragile bubble of happiness. He learned to cook scrambled eggs without burning them. She taught him to see beauty in simple things, like the way the afternoon light streamed through the window or the sound of rain on the roof. They watched old movies curled up on the old second-hand sofa she had bought. She drew while he worked on his laptop, and every now and then they exchanged glances that needed no words. It was the happiest time of his life, and the most frightening, because the more time he spent with Clara, the more Henry realized the chasm between their worlds. She wasn't impressed by money. She didn't care about status. She didn't want to meet influential people or attend social events. She just wanted to create, live simply, love without complications. And that, paradoxically, was what attracted him most and what terrified him most. The family pressure mounted. His mother's calls, always punctuated by questions about when he would return home for good, when he would assume the responsibilities that were his. His father, more subtle, casually mentioned important mergers, strategic partnerships, the need for a solid public image. His younger sister, Beatrice, was the only one who rooted for him, even without fully understanding. And then, on a rainy September night, Henry decided. He couldn't live divided anymore. He didn't want to hide anymore. He loved her, truly loved her, and he wanted the world to know. The marriage proposal happened right there in the messy apartment, among brushes and unfinished canvases. He had no ring. He had no rehearsed speech. He simply knelt before her and asked, his voice trembling, if she would agree to build a life beside him, forever. Clara cried. Anne said yes. She said yes with eyes shining with hope, with hands trembling in his, with a smile that illuminated every dark corner within Henry's chest. He should have realized at that moment that such intense happiness carried the premonition of an equally devastating fall. The family meeting took place a week later. Henry announced the engagement with the conviction of someone who had finally found his place in the world. He expected resistance, of course, but he didn't expect the war that followed. His mother, Helen Maxwell, turned livid. She didn't scream, didn't lose her composure. It was worse than that. Her icy silence filled the room like a toxic fog. His father, Maurice, crossed his arms and asked, with that rehearsed executive calm, if Henry had considered the consequences. His sister tried to intervene but was quickly silenced. Consequences. The word echoed in Henry's mind as he faced his mother's harsh gaze. In the following days, the pressure intensified. Meetings with lawyers, conversations with board members, warnings about the ongoing international merger, a billion-pound deal that could collapse if the company's image was compromised. And Clara, according to them, was a threat. They had nothing against her personally, they said, but there was no family history, no connections, no guarantees. A freelance illustrator with no financial stability, no name, no prenuptial. What if she was an opportunist? What if the press found out? What if everything fell apart? Henry resisted, he fought. He said he wouldn't give her up. But with each passing day, the walls closed in more. His phone was replaced under the pretext of corporate security. His access to company systems was reconfigured. His schedule became controlled by the personal assistant his mother had hired. And then one morning, he woke up and realized he was trapped. Trapped in an invisible web of obligations, expectations, and veiled threats. Meanwhile, Clara waited. She waited for him to come back, to explain the sudden silence, to say that everything was all right. But Henry didn't return. Not because he didn't want to, but because every attempt he made to leave was blocked, every message was intercepted, every movement monitored. And it was in this forced silence that Clara discovered something that would change everything. She was pregnant, and at the same time joy flooded her. Fear also arrived, because Henry had disappeared, and she didn't understand why. Henry blinked, returning to the present. The rain continued to beat against the window. The glass was empty, and the weight in his chest was unbearable. He didn't know at that time that every call from Clara had been blocked, that every message had been deleted before reaching him, that every attempt she made to reach him had been systematically erased by people who swore to protect the Maxwell name at any cost. He didn't know that. While he was dragged to events and meetings, Clara fought alone against a high-risk pregnancy and an autoimmune disease that no one had detected before. He didn't know that she had left broken and exhausted. For a small town in the Cotswolds, far from everything and everyone, he didn't know he had 2 daughters. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like us. Tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. Clara Miller held the pregnancy test with trembling hands, sitting on the cold bathroom floor. 2 pink lines, clear, unmistakable. She should be happy, she thought. She should be bouncing around the house, planning how to tell Henry, imagining his face upon receiving the news. But what she felt was a tight knot in her stomach, and a fear that grew with every second. Henry hadn't appeared for a week. He didn't respond to messages. He didn't answer calls. And it didn't make sense. They were engaged. They had planned a future together, and suddenly he vanished as if he had never existed. Clara stood up, leaning on the sink, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red from crying so much, her hair disheveled, her skin pale. She tried to smile, tried to imagine there was a simple explanation, that he was just busy with work, that soon everything would return to normal. But deep down, an insistent voice told her that something was terribly wrong. In the following days, Clara tried everything. She called his number dozens of times, but it always went straight to voicemail. She sent messages via WhatsApp, but they were never read. She went to the commercial building where the Maxwell Company office was located, but she was stopped at reception. She had no authorization. She wasn't on the list. She couldn't go up. The receptionist, a blonde woman with a professional smile, said that Mr. Maxwell was in important meetings and could not be disturbed. Clara insisted, explaining that it was urgent, that she needed to speak with him personally. The woman merely repeated, with the same cordial and mechanical voice that it was not possible. Clara left there humiliated, tears streaming down her face, not understanding what had happened. Had he changed his mind? Had the marriage proposal been a mistake? Had he realized that she wasn't good enough for his world? The doubts gnawed at her from within, and along with them came the nausea. At first, Clara thought it was just nervousness and anxiety, but when she started experiencing constant dizziness and a fatigue that wouldn't go away even after sleeping for hours, she decided to see a doctor. The consulting room smelled of disinfectant and had colorful posters about reproductive health on the walls. Dr. Cecilia Hayes, a middle-aged woman with red-framed glasses, examined her carefully. She ordered tests, many tests, and when the results came, the smile on her face disappeared. Clara was 8 weeks pregnant, but that wasn't all. The tests showed something more: altered inflammatory markers, abnormal antibodies, signs of an autoimmune condition that had gone unnoticed until then. The doctor explained in a calm but serious voice that Clara had a rare disease that could complicate the pregnancy. It wasn't impossible to carry the pregnancy to term, but it would require rigorous monitoring, specific medications, and heightened care. Clara heard everything as if she were underwater. The words arrived distorted, muffled. Pregnant, sick, risk, Henry. Where was Henry? Why wasn't he there beside her, holding her hand, saying everything would be all right? She left the consulting room stunned, with a pile of prescriptions and test requests in her hands. The world seemed to spin faster than she could keep up. She sat on a park bench, breathing deeply, trying to organize her thoughts. She needed to tell Henry. He needed to know. He needed to be there with her. Clara tried again. She called, sent messages, went to the apartment where he lived before they moved in together. But everything was empty, locked, silent. She went to the Maxwell family home, an imposing mansion in an affluent London neighborhood. She rang the doorbell, hoping someone would answer. And someone did. An elegant woman with blonde hair pulled back in an impeccable bun and eyes blue as ice opened the door. Helen Maxwell, Henry's mother. Clara recognized her from the few photos Henry had shown her. Clara introduced herself, trying to keep her voice steady. She said she needed to speak with Henry, that it was urgent. Helen looked her up and down, with an expression that mixed disdain and weariness. Then, with a voice soft but cutting like glass, she said that Henry was fine, that he had made important decisions about the future, and that it would be better for everyone if Clara moved on with her own life. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Move on, important decisions? What did that mean? She tried to ask, tried to insist, but Helen was already closing the door with a cold smile on her lips. It was at that moment, there on the pavement in front of the Maxwell mansion, that Clara understood. Or at least she thought she understood. Henry had changed his mind. He had returned to his world, to his family, to the life he always had. And she, with her simplicity, her childish drawings, and her lack of an important surname, had no place there. The following weeks were a blur of pain and confusion. Clara returned to the apartment she had shared with Henry, but every corner was a memory, every object a stab. She tried to work, tried to draw, but her hands trembled and the colors no longer made sense. The nausea worsened. The fatigue became unbearable. And the loneliness. Oh, the loneliness was a monster that slowly devoured her. It was when she saw the photo that her heart broke completely. A friend, unaware of what had happened, sent her a link to a magazine article. There was Henry, elegant in a dark suit beside a blonde and sophisticated woman, daughter of an international investor. The caption spoke of a new engagement, a strategic alliance, a promising future. Clara read and reread those words until they lost all meaning. He had moved on. He had found someone from his world, someone suitable, someone the family approved of. And she, Clara, with a baby growing inside her and a disease threatening everything, had been discarded like a bad sketch. She cried until she had no more tears. She cried for the love she thought was real. She cried for the life they had planned. She cried for the lazy mornings and the nights spent embracing. And she cried above all for the child growing inside her who would never know her father. It was her friend Marianne, an illustrator like her, who suggested the move. Marianne had a cousin who lived in Burford, Cotswolds, and knew of a house for rent. Small, cheap, far from everything. Far from London, far from the memories, far from the Maxwells. Clara hesitated. Burford was the opposite of everything she knew. A historic, tranquil, touristy town, without the hustle and bustle of London, without the opportunities, without the familiarity. But perhaps it was exactly what she needed. A fresh start. A place where no one knew her, where no one knew her story, where she could raise her child in peace. She packed her bags with a heavy heart. She took only the essentials: clothes, drawing materials, a few books. She left behind the apartment, the memories, and any hope that Henry would return. On her last night in London, Clara stayed awake looking out at the city from the window, one hand on her belly that was starting to swell. Tomorrow she would leave. Tomorrow a new life would begin, alone but not completely. Because inside her, two small lives were forming, although she didn't know it yet. Two identical girls, with the eyes of the father who abandoned them before even knowing they existed. The bus journey to Burford lasted for hours. Clara watched the landscape change through the window. Tall buildings giving way to green hills, the grey of the asphalt transforming into earthy tones and vegetation. When she finally arrived, with a heavy backpack on her back and fatigue seeped into her bones, she took a deep breath and tried to smile. The house was simple. White walls, parquet flooring, a small balcony with a view of the hills. But it was hers, and it was enough. There Clara set up her makeshift studio, hung plants in the windows, and slowly began to reconstruct the shattered pieces of herself. The months in Burford passed slowly, as if time there followed its own rhythm, different from the rush of London. Clara woke up with the sun streaming through the window, with the bird song replacing the noise of horns and engines. Gradually she got to know the neighbours, the shopkeepers on the main street, the women who sold flowers at the Saturday market. The pregnancy advanced under the watchful eye of Dr. Marina Davies, a local doctor who had specialized in complicated cases precisely because, in a small town, there was no luxury of choosing easy patients. Marina closely monitored Clara's condition, adjusting medications, ordering tests, making home visits when necessary. And it was Marina who, during a routine ultrasound, looked at the screen with surprise and announced the news that would change everything again. It was two girls, identical twins. Clara was speechless. Two. How would she care for two children alone? How would she support two lives when she could barely support her own? But at the same time, something inside her lit up. Two girls. They would have each other. They would never be alone as she was. The birth happened on a full moon night, 6 months after Clara's arrival in Burford. It was difficult, long, exhaustive. The autoimmune condition complicated everything, and there were moments when Marina feared the worst. But Clara fought. She fought with every fibre of her body, with every last bit of strength she still had. And when she finally heard the first cry, quickly followed by the second, it was all worth it. Alice was born first, already screaming, already complaining about the world. Luna came 3 minutes later, quietly, her little eyes closed as if she wasn't yet sure if she wanted to stay. But she did. Both of them stayed. And Clara, exhausted, with tears streaming down her face, held her daughters in her arms and swore she would do everything, absolutely everything, to protect them. The first few years were the hardest. Clara worked during the nights after the girls were asleep, creating illustrations for publishers who accepted remote work. The money was little, but it was enough for diapers, second-hand clothes, the medicines she still needed. The neighbours helped when they could, bringing soups, offering to look after the girls while Clara went to the market. Alice and Luna grew up among watercolours and coloured pencils, between invented stories and lullabies, sung with a voice hoarse from tiredness. Clara never spoke of their father. When the girls asked, she changed the subject, saying she would explain one day that they were too young to understand. And the girls, clever as they were, realized that it was a topic that hurt their mother. So they stopped asking. At 3 years old, Alice and Luna were small copies of each other, with the same wavy brown hair, the same mischievous smile, the same eyes that Clara tried not to look at for too long, because those eyes weren't hers. They were Henry's. That rare grey tone, that curve in the eyelids, that way of shining when they were curious. Every time Clara looked at her daughters, she saw the man she had loved. And it hurt. It always hurt. Meanwhile, in London, Henry Maxwell became exactly what his family had always wanted. He took over the company after his father decided to retire. He expanded the business throughout Latin America. He signed multi-million-pound contracts. He appeared on the covers of specialized magazines, always with that controlled smile, always with the right words, always impeccable. But those who looked closely saw the dark circles under his eyes that makeup didn't completely hide. They saw how he avoided social events beyond those strictly necessary. They saw that he was never again seen with the supposed heiress of the international investor, that the engagement announced in magazines never materialized. Henry worked 18 hours a day, often slept at the office, and avoided any conversation that wasn't about business. His sister, Beatrice, tried to bring up his personal life, but Henry deflected. His mother insisted that he needed to think about starting a family, about continuing the Maxwell name. Henry merely smiled coldly and changed the subject. He didn't speak of Clara. He had never uttered her name aloud again. But he thought about her. He thought about her every night, when the solitude of the immense apartment became unbearable. He thought about how everything had fallen apart. He wondered if she had moved on, if she had found someone, if she was happy. And he tried to convince himself that he had done the right thing, that he had protected the company, that he had had no choice. It was on an ordinary day, a Tuesday morning, that the past and present collided. Henry was at Heathrow Airport, on his way to an international conference in New York. He had already checked in, was passing through the boarding area, distracted by emails on his phone. It was then that a child's voice made him stop, a high-pitched voice complaining about something. He looked up and saw a woman with her back to him, crouched down, adjusting the straps of a small backpack on the backs of two little girls. The woman's hair was hastily tied in a messy bun, and she wore a simple cotton blouse. There was something familiar in her posture, in the way she moved her hands. Henry took a few more steps, not understanding why that scene had captivated him. And then one of the girls turned around. The world stopped. The eyes. Those eyes. Henry knew those eyes. He saw those eyes every morning in the mirror. That rare grey hue, that shape. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. The second girl turned too, and Henry felt the air rush from his lungs, twins, identical, with his eyes, with his features, with something of him stamped on their faces, unmistakable, striking. He took a step forward, his heart pounding erratically, his mind trying to process what he saw. And then the woman stood up and turned around. Clara. She was thinner. She had deep dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was longer. But it was her. Clara Miller, the woman he had loved, the woman who had disappeared from his life 3 years ago. Their eyes met. For a second, maybe two, the whole world disappeared. There were only the two of them, separated by a few meters and an ocean of unspoken pain. Clara paled. Henry saw the shock on her face, saw when understanding dawned, saw when she squeezed the girl's hands harder. And then, before he could say anything, before he could move, Clara turned and walked away quickly, pulling her daughters with her. Henry tried to follow her. He tried to push his way through the people, but the boarding area was crowded and Clara had already disappeared into the crowd. He stood there trembling as hundreds of people passed him by as if nothing had happened. Daughters. He had daughters. 2 daughters. And Clara had never said anything, had never tried to make contact, had never asked for help. Why? Why had she vanished like that? Why had she hidden the girls from him? Henry missed his flight. He sat for hours on an airport bench, trying to understand, trying to piece things together. And when he finally managed to think clearly again, he picked up his phone and called a number he rarely used. Robert Hayes, private investigator. Discreet, efficient, expensive. Henry explained the situation, described Clara, said what he needed to know. Robert promised results in 2 weeks. The days that followed were torturous. Henry couldn't concentrate in meetings. He couldn't sleep. He saw those grey eyes everywhere, saw Clara's face pale with shock, saw the girls holding hands being pulled away from him. When Robert finally called with the report, Henry was at home in the middle of the night, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. He listened to everything in silence. The pregnancy, the illness, the attempts to make contact that never reached him, the move to Burford, the difficult birth. The girls, Alice and Luna Miller Maxwell, raised alone by a mother who sold flowers and illustrations to survive. Every word was a stab. Every detail a devastating revelation. Clara had tried to talk to him. She had gone after him, and someone had blocked it. Someone had erased traces. Someone had deliberately kept the pregnancy a secret. Henry hung up the phone and vomited. He vomited from anger, from guilt, from self-disgust. Because even if he hadn't known, even if he had been manipulated, the result was the same. He had abandoned Clara. He had let her face everything alone. He had lost 3 years of his daughter's lives. The next morning, without telling anyone, he got in his car and drove to Burford. He needed to see. He needed to understand. He needed somehow to start fixing what had been destroyed. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like us. Tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. The road to Burford seemed endless. Henry drove for hours, passing small towns, crossing hills, leaving behind the world he knew. The closer he got, the faster his heart raced. He had no plan. He had no rehearsed speech. He just knew he had to be there. When he finally arrived, the sun was already setting, painting the sky orange and pink over the hills. Burford was exactly as he had imagined. Cobblestone streets, colonial houses, ancient churches, tourists walking with cameras slung around their necks. A peaceful place far from the chaos of London. A place where Clara had chosen to rebuild her life. Henry found a discreet inn and spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing what he would say when he saw her. But all the words seemed inadequate, insufficient, too empty to carry the weight of everything that needed to be said. The next morning, he started looking. It wasn't difficult. Burford was small enough for everyone to know each other, and Clara, with her colourful illustrations and her 2 identical daughters, was easily recognizable. A lady in a craft shop pointed the way, a flower shop in the historic centre near the main church. Henry walked there slowly, each step heavier than the last. And then he saw her. Clara was at the door of the small shop, arranging flower pots, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, wearing a light cotton blouse and a skirt that danced in the wind. She looked different, thinner, more tired, but also stronger, as if she had been broken and reassembled, and the invisible scars had made her more resilient. Beside her, the 2 girls drew on the ground with coloured chalk, laughing loudly, completely oblivious to the adult world around them. Henry stood there, hidden on the other side of the street, just watching. His daughters, Alice and Luna, so similar, so full of life, so completely unknown to him. It was Alice who saw him first. She looked up from her drawing and stared at the strange man across the street. Henry felt her gaze like an electric shock. Then Luna also looked, and the 2 exchanged whispers, curious. Clara followed her daughter's gaze and froze. For a long moment no one moved. Clara turned pale, her fingers tightening on the pot she held. Henry took a step forward, hesitant. And then Clara shook her head, almost imperceptibly, in a gesture that clearly said, "Not here, not now, not in front of them." Henry understood. He retreated. He turned and left, but not far. He spent the day in town, always keeping his distance, always watching. He saw Clara taking the girls to school. He saw her attending to customers at the flower shop. He saw when she closed the shop at the end of the afternoon and returned home with her daughters skipping around her. It was only when the sun set and the girls were already inside the house that Clara came out. She walked to where Henry was sitting on a park bench and stood there, arms crossed, her expression stern. "What do you want?" Her voice came out colder than Henry expected. He stood up, words escaping him. "I saw you at the airport. I didn't know, Clara. I swear I didn't know." Clara gave a bitter laugh. "You didn't know. You didn't know. I tried to tell you, Henry. I tried dozens of times. I went to your house, to your office, sent messages, called, and you vanished. Disappeared as if I had never existed. I received nothing." Henry took a step forward, desperate. "My family. They blocked everything. They changed my phone, controlled my access. I didn't know anything, Clara. I didn't know about the pregnancy. I didn't know you were sick. I didn't know you had left." Clara shook her head, tears beginning to fall. "It changes nothing, Henry. It doesn't change the fact that I went through everything alone. The birth, the illness, the sleepless nights, the fear of not being able to take care of them. You weren't there, and now you show up here after 3 years wanting what? Forgiveness. Acceptance. I want to meet my daughters. Henry's voice came out hoarse. I lost 3 years. I won't lose any more. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. You will meet them, but not as their father, not yet. They are small, Henry, they don't understand. If you want to be part of their lives, you'll have to earn it, slowly, on their terms. And so it began. Henry rented a small house in town and started frequenting the flower shop. At first, he only watched from a distance. Then he started buying flowers. Clara treated him with professional coldness, but allowed him to stay. And the girls, curious like all children, began to approach. Him. Who are you? Alice asked one day directly, without beating around the bush. Henry crouched down to her height. I'm Henry, a friend of your mum's. Do you live in London? Luna asked more timidly. I do. But I'm spending some time here. Why? Alice crossed her little arms, suspicious. Henry smiled. Because Burford is beautiful. And because I want to get to know you better. Weeks passed. Henry appeared every day, always with small, thoughtful gifts. Illustrated books about robots that planted trees, a game about forest animals, special colored pencils that changed shade depending on the light. He never overdid it, never forced anything. He just stayed nearby, available, present. Alice was the most suspicious. She asked questions all the time, testing, gauging his answers. Luna was shyer, but also more affectionate. It was she who, for the first time, took Henry's hand when they were walking through the square. It was a simple, natural gesture, but it made his heart almost burst with emotion. Clara watched everything from afar, torn. She saw how her daughters became attached to the stranger. She saw how careful, patient, and genuinely interested Henry was. And she also saw in his eyes the same pain she carried. A pain of lost time, of stolen opportunities, of a love that had been destroyed by forces beyond them both. One afternoon, after the girls were already asleep, Clara and Henry sat on her house's porch. The night was cool, the sky full of stars that couldn't be seen in London. Why didn't you fight harder? Clara asked, her voice low. Why did you just accept it? Henry was silent for a long moment. I thought I was doing the right thing. Protecting you, protecting the company. I didn't know that protecting the company meant losing you. Losing them. You saw me at that event, with that woman. Clara didn't look at him. I saw the photo. The engagement. Henry shook his head. There was no engagement. It was a sham. My mother organized it. The press published it, but I never asked that woman to marry me. I never even touched her. It was all an image play. Clara finally looked at him. And you let it happen. I was trapped, Clara, you don't understand. They controlled everything. Every step, every word. I tried to leave, I tried to find you, but you didn't try hard enough. Her voice came out firm. And I paid the price. Henry closed his eyes. I know. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Henry cancelled meetings, postponed commitments, delegated projects. For the first time in his life, he put something else above the company. And that something else was 2 3-year-old girls who called him Henry, the friend who told funny stories and knew how to make paper airplanes that flew farther than any other. But Burford was a small town, and Henry Maxwell, no matter how discreet he tried to be, was a known face. It was only a matter of time until someone recognized him. And when that happened, everything changed. It was a simple photo, one that shouldn't have meant anything. Henry walking through Burford Square, one hand holding a strawberry ice lolly, the other holding Alice's hand while Luna skipped ahead, laughing. An everyday, mundane moment, full of innocence. But the person who took that photo recognized his face. And within hours, the image was everywhere. Henry Maxwell, the billionaire CEO, the face of the new generation of British entrepreneurs, appeared in a small town in the Cotswolds with 2 children who were undeniably identical to him. The eyes were the same, the features the same. There was no denying it. Social media exploded. Theories emerged every second. Who were those girls? Were they secret daughters? Why was he hiding them? Who was the mother? Journalists began to investigate. Gossip blogs published sensational articles. And in less than 24 hours, the story was on the front page of every news website in the country. Secret daughters of magnate Henry Maxwell. Ex-fiancée appears with mysterious twins. CEO could lose fortune over unrecognized paternity. Clara saw the headlines on her phone and felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She was at the flower shop when the calls started coming in. Journalists wanting interviews, photographers asking permission to take pictures, strangers asking if it was true, if the girls were really Henry Maxwell's daughters. She turned off her phone, locked the shop, and ran home. The girls were at school, but it wouldn't be long before someone showed up there too. Clara grabbed her car keys, went to pick them up early, inventing some excuse for the teacher, and took them straight home, locking all the doors and windows. "Mum, what's happening?" Alice asked, noticing her nervousness. "Nothing, love. I'm just tired. Let's stay home today, all right?" But within a few hours the peace ended. Cars started parking in front of the house. Cameras, recorders, microphones, reporters knocking on the door shouting questions. Clara held her daughters away from the windows, her heart pounding erratically, not knowing what to do. That's when Henry arrived. He parked his car haphazardly, pushed his way through the journalists, shoving anyone in his path, and knocked on the door. "Clara, it's me. Open up." She hesitated, but opened it. Henry quickly entered, closing the door behind him. He was disheveled, his hair messy, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I'm sorry. I didn't know this would happen. I didn't think that—" "How could you not think?" Clara cried, tears streaming down her face. "You're famous, Henry. Of course they'd find out. Now look what you've done. The girls will be exposed. They'll become news. I'll fix this." Henry interrupted her, holding her shoulders. "I promise. I'll put an end to this." "How?" Clara shook her head, disbelieving. "You can't erase it. It's everywhere already." Henry took a deep breath. "Then I'll confirm it. I'll tell the truth. I'll publicly acknowledge that they are my daughters." Clara stared at him, incredulous. You'll do that?" Henry looked at the girls, who were clinging to their mother, frightened by all the noise outside. "Yes, I'll do what I should have done 3 years ago." He walked out of the house and went straight into the midst of the journalists. The cameras all turned to him. Microphones were thrust towards his face. Questions came from all sides at once. But Henry raised his hand, asking for silence, and when he got it, he spoke. "My name is Henry Maxwell, and yes, the girls you saw in the photos are my daughters. Alice and Luna. They are 3.5 years old. Their mother is Clara Miller, an extraordinary woman who raised our daughters alone because I was not present. Not by my choice, but because I was prevented from knowing of their existence. My family concealed information, blocked attempts at contact, and kept me away from my own daughters for 3 years." The journalists fell silent, absorbing every word. Henry continued, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "I didn't know Clara was pregnant. I didn't know she was sick. I didn't know she had moved to Burford to raise our daughters away from everything. I found out a few months ago by chance at an airport. And since then, I've been trying to make up for lost time. But time doesn't turn back, and I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life. The guilt of not having been there when Clara needed me most. The guilt of not having seen my daughters born. The guilt of not having been the father they deserved from the beginning." He paused, clearing his throat. "And now you are here, invading their privacy, frightening small children, turning their lives into a circus. Why, to sell headlines? To increase views? These girls didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to have a famous father. They didn't ask to become news. So I ask, please respect them. Respect Clara. Let them live in peace." A journalist shouted from the back, "What about the company? Will you officially recognize paternity? Will you include the girls in the inheritance?" Henry stared at him. "I will do everything necessary to guarantee my daughter's future. If that means losing contracts, losing partners, losing my position in the company, so be it. They are more important than any business." The declaration caused an uproar. Cameras flashed. Journalists began to shout more questions. But Henry had already said what he needed to. He turned his back and went back inside the house, leaving the chaos outside. Inside, Clara was sitting on the floor with the girls, trying to distract them with drawings. She looked at Henry when he entered, her eyes full of tears. "Did you really say all that?" He nodded, tired. "I did, and it was true. Every word. The consequences came quickly." The next morning, the Maxwell Company board convened an emergency meeting. Helen Maxwell was furious. Maurice, Henry's father, tried to control the damage. Legal advisors spoke of lawsuits. contractual clauses, brand image. Henry listened to everything in silence. And when they finally gave him the floor, he simply said, "I will temporarily step down from the presidency. I need to be with my daughters. I need to fix what has been destroyed." "You can't do that." Helen stood up indignant. "The company needs you." "The company will survive." Henry stared at her. "But I won't survive without my daughters." "Not again." International partners began to pull back. Investors questioned the stability of the leadership. The specialized press speculated about the future of the holding. Shares fell. Numbers plummeted. Everything Henry had built in recent years seemed to be crumbling, but for the first time he didn't care. Returned to Burford the same day. He found Clara on the porch looking at the hills. He sat beside her in silence. After a long moment she asked, "Do you regret it?" Henry shook his head. "Not for a second. You could lose everything." "I already lost everything once." He looked at her. "When I lost you, when I lost the girls, the rest is just money and titles. It means nothing." Clara sighed, resting her head on his shoulder. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself that gesture. Small, fragile, but significant. Henry closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her presence, and thought that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. But the peace didn't last long, because the stress of everything was taking its toll. Clara began to feel the pains again, the extreme fatigue, the signs that her autoimmune condition was returning. She tried to hide it. She didn't want to worry Henry, she didn't want the girls to notice. But the body doesn't lie, and it wasn't long before she had a relapse. Clara woke up in the middle of the night with a sharp pain coursing through her body. She tried to get up, but her legs didn't respond properly. The room spun around her, and a cold sweat covered her forehead. She knew that feeling, knew it all too well. The disease was returning stronger this time, fueled by the stress of the past few weeks. She managed to drag herself to the bathroom and took the emergency medicines Dr. Marina Davies had prescribed. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. She would need medical help, monitoring, perhaps even hospitalization. But how would she do that with the girls? How would she explain that their mother was sick again? Henry appeared the next morning and immediately realized something was wrong. Clara was too pale, her movements slow, her breathing irregular. "You need to go to the hospital." He held her arm gently. "I'm fine. Just tired." Clara tried to smile, but the lie was obvious. "Clara, please." He gently pulled her to sit. "Let me help you. Let me take care of you, at least now." "What about the girls? Who will stay with the girls?" "I will." Henry didn't hesitate. "I'll stay with them while you take care of yourself. I promise I'll protect them." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to say that he didn't know how to take care of 2 3.5-year-old girls, that they would ask 1,000 questions, that it would be too complicated. But the pain was so strong that she merely nodded, defeated. Marianne, her illustrator friend who still lived in London but visited Burford occasionally, was called to help, and together Henry and Marianne took Clara to the small-town hospital. Dr. Marina Davies examined Clara and confirmed what she already knew. Severe relapse. She needed absolute rest, intravenous medication, constant monitoring. She would be hospitalized for at least a week, perhaps longer. Clara cried, not from pain, but from the anguish of being away from her daughters. Marina reassured her, saying the girls could visit her, that she would be fine. But Clara knew it was a lie to say everything would be fine when her body was rebelling again. Back at the house, Henry faced Alice and Luna, who asked where their mother was. He knelt in front of them, choosing his words carefully. "Mummy isn't feeling well. She needs to stay at the hospital for a few days to get better. But you can visit her tomorrow, all right? Will she be okay?" Luna asked, her big eyes full of worry. "Yes, she will." Henry squeezed her little hand. "The doctors will take very good care of her." Alice remained silent, observing. Always observing. That girl was frighteningly perceptive for her age, and Henry felt her gaze analyzing him, measuring him, trying to understand things she didn't yet have words to express. The following days were a challenge. Henry tried to maintain the girls' routine, take them to school, prepare meals, put them to bed. Marianne helped when she could, but she had to return to London. Henry was exhausted, but also discovering a side of himself he didn't know. The patience to explain for the 10th time how to tie shoelaces, the creativity to invent bedtime stories, the tenderness of drying tears when Luna had nightmares. But it was Alice who worried him. She was too quiet, too thoughtful. And one afternoon, when he was on the phone discussing company matters, in a low voice in the living room, Alice appeared at the door with that penetrating gaze. Henry quickly hung up. "Hi, Alice, everything all right?" "I heard," she said, her voice small but firm. "You said the Maxwell Company needs a Maxwell in leadership." Henry swallowed hard. You heard that?" Alice nodded. "Our surname is Maxwell, too. Mummy said she put it there. She said it was important to have Daddy's name, even if we didn't know him." Henry's heart stopped. "Alice, are you our daddy?" The question came out direct, without beating around the bush. "Is that why you stayed here? Is that why you take care of us?" Henry felt the ground disappear. He hadn't prepared for that conversation. It wasn't how it was supposed to happen, but lying now would be worse than any truth. He knelt, getting down to her height. "Yes, I am your father, and Luna's too." Alice was silent for a moment that seemed eternal. Then, with a trembling voice, she asked, "Why didn't you want to stay with us before?" The question shattered him. "Because I didn't know you existed, Alice. Your mum tried to tell me, but bad people stopped her. People from my family. They hid everything from me, and when I found out, I rushed here. I came to meet you. I came to meet Luna, and I'm never leaving again, I promise." Alice didn't answer. She just turned and ran off. Henry followed her, but she had already gone into the room she shared with Luna, locking the door. He stood outside listening to the two girls whispering, and then he heard the sound he most feared, the sound of the bedroom window being opened. Henry broke down the door in time to see the two girls jumping out the low window into the garden. "Alice, Luna!" he shouted, but they were already running. He went out the front door trying to catch them, but the girls were fast and knew the town better than he did. The sky was darkening rapidly, heavy clouds accumulating over the hills. A storm was approaching. Henry ran through the cobblestone streets, shouting his daughters' names, panic growing with every second. He asked for help from residents, shopkeepers, anyone passing by. And soon the whole town was looking for the two girls who had run away. The rain started heavily, torrential, turning the streets into small rivers. Henry was drenched, desperate, imagining the girls lost, scared, alone in the middle of the storm. And then someone shouted, "The church!" Someone saw two children entering the main church. Henry ran as he had never run in his life. He climbed the slippery stone steps, pushed the heavy wooden door and entered. The church was empty, silent, lit only by a few candles burning on the altar. And there, kneeling in the first pew, were Alice and Luna. They were wet, shivering with cold, hugging each other. Alice was crying softly, and Luna was scared, not quite understanding what was happening. Henry walked slowly towards them, his heart broken into a million pieces. He knelt beside them, not daring to touch, just staying close. "I'm sorry." His voice came out broken. "I'm sorry for not having been there from the beginning. I'm sorry for everything you and your mum went through alone. I didn't know, but that changes nothing. I should have fought harder. I should have searched more. I should have been stronger." Alice turned to him, her little face red from crying so much. "We thought you didn't want us, that we weren't good enough." Henry felt the tears stream down his face uncontrollably. "You are everything. Everything I ever wanted and didn't know. You and your mum are the only thing that matters, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it. Proving that I deserve to be called Dad." Luna, younger, more innocent, stretched out her little hand and touched his face, feeling the tears. "Don't cry. When we cry, Mummy always says a hug makes it better." Henry gave a tear-wet laugh and opened his arms. Alice hesitated for only a second before throwing herself into them, followed by Luna. And there, in the silence of that centuries-old church, with the sound of rain beating outside, Henry hugged his daughters for the first time, knowing who they truly were. And he felt finally that he was home. When the storm passed, Henry took the girls back. Clara had already received a temporary discharge from the hospital upon hearing of their escape, arriving home pale and weak, but desperate to see her daughters. When she saw the three of them enter, wet but whole, she broke down in tears of relief. In the following days, with Clara slowly recovering at home, Henry decided it was time to truly confront the past. He hired lawyers, requested a complete investigation into what had happened 3 years ago. And when the documents arrived, the truth was even crueler than he had imagined. His mother, Helen, had orchestrated everything. She had hired people to intercept Clara's calls. She had bribed employees to delete messages. She had even paid the office receptionist to prevent Clara from meeting him. Everything documented, everything recorded, everything proven. A meticulous operation to erase Clara from Henry's life and protect the image of the Maxwell family. Henry confronted his mother on a cold afternoon. He showed her the documents, the evidence, everything. Helen didn't deny it. She merely said, with that characteristic coldness, that she had done what was necessary to protect the future of the company and the family name. "You destroyed my life," Henry said, his voice restrained but vibrating with rage. "You made me lose 3 years with my daughters. You let Clara suffer alone, sick, pregnant, without help. And now you come to tell me you did this for me? I did it for what you represent. For the company, for the family." Helen raised her chin. "You are a Maxwell, Henry. You have responsibilities. I am a father before I am a Maxwell, and I will have to live with the weight of what you did. But you will live knowing you lost your son. He left there and never returned. He cut ties with his mother, distanced himself from the company's operations, handed control over to professional managers, and he returned to Burford, this time to stay." Weeks later, on a quiet afternoon, Clara and Henry were sitting on the porch while Alice and Luna played in the garden. Clara was better. The crisis had passed, the doctors optimistic about the treatment. And for the first time in a long time there was peace. "Can we go back?" Clara asked softly. "After everything that happened, is it possible to rebuild?" Henry took her hand. "I don't know, but I want to try. I want to try every day for the rest of my life, if you let me." Clara looked at her daughters, at Henry, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "Maybe we can, slowly, one day at a time." Henry smiled, a true smile, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt that the future was not just an obligation to fulfill, but something worth living for. End of story. Dear readers, we hope the story of Henry, Clara, Alice, and Luna has touched your hearts. How many times do we lose precious time by not fighting for what truly matters? How many stories could have different endings if the truth were told in time? We have prepared a special selection of equally engaging narratives for you. You can find them here, right next door. If this story stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexities of life, love, family, and redemption. And in the comments, we want to know, do you believe in second chances? Would you have made the same choices as Clara and Henry? Share your opinion with us. Your story matters too, and we are here to listen. Until the next emotional journey,